lifelong learning. So the sector over a period of time has firstly burgeoned to such a size, and adding to that dimension is the fact that as a subject, education lies in the government of India business as or within the constitution of this country, not in the government of India business, in the constitution of this country, as a subject included within the concurrent list. And in a federal country, when you say it is in the concurrent list, the success of a policy greatly depends not just on a policy that is brought out by the government of India at the union level, but to what extent you are able to carry along the states in implementing the policy. And here, as far as policy implementation, I think we do a grave injustice when we read many things into the policy which are more political rather than which are more policy perspective kind of a thing. The idea is that a policy will not really try to do or will not recommend changes which are detrimental to the very stakeholder that it seeks to cater. In this particular case, the National Education Policy 2020, the three major stakeholders are the students, the teachers, and the educational institutions, be they schools or colleges or universities or engineering institutions or any category of institution that we are dealing with. And the whole idea of NEP 2020 has been mainly to empower these stakeholders because of the fast changes that are happening driven by disruptive technologies, the fact that we are seeing a situation where disruptive technologies are challenging the job profiles that our young students may have to deal with, and we are hearing statements that the jobs of tomorrow are not known, or we do not know what are the kind of skill sets that the youngsters will have to have in order to really meet with the challenges of a dynamic, technologically driven society. Other than this, you also find that thanks to the fact that we are a very globally connected society, the impact of changes that happen in one part of the world, which affects trade, economy, foreign policy, and many other aspects, are so instantaneous that, unlike maybe many of us in the generation that we belong, did not have to really grapple with the velocity and the speed with which those changes impact us. And therefore, the comfort zones that we enjoyed are no longer the comfort zones that our students are enjoying. Again, you have the dimensions in terms of the major components of education itself, which is of knowledge and learning, both having metamorphosed in a manner which calls for changes in the policy. The fact that we are moving in a knowledge-based society to interconnectedness of knowledge disciplines, and therefore making out a strong case for moving towards interdisciplinarity, multidisciplinarity, and transdisciplinarity. And the learning part of it also being multidimensional, with the four pillars of learning to know, to do, to live together, and to live with others, and learning to be. The two verticals of learning and knowledge makes out a very strong case for individualization and customization of learning experiences in a manner by which educational systems should be able to sort of help students to identify their own talents, recognize it, and nurture it for promoting their holistic integrated development. Now, the policy has articulated in higher education a lot of changes, firstly, with regard to moving towards a very multidisciplinary integrated undergraduate program. And related to that, has talked in terms of the structure of higher education being classified in terms of the character or the function that it performs in moving from maybe traditional silo-based disciplinary education to looking at whether they are teaching intensive universities or research intensive universities, and a whole large mass of affiliated colleges which form the base of the pyramid, so to say, in the educational structure, which needs to actually get sort of empowered, become autonomous, to move towards what we wanted in the policy as becoming degree granting autonomous colleges. Now, the changes in the nature of the academic programs, coupled with the character of the higher education institutions, automatically calls for changes in the way we like to create learning environments for students, the kind of changes that faculty will have to undergo, and other dimensions where we are incorporating a lot of flexibility in terms of guidelines which talk in terms of multiple entry and multiple exit and re-entry, and so also in terms of weaving in open and distance learning and vocational education within mainstream, creating instrumentalities of the academic bank of credit and the national higher education qualifications framework, creating a seamless merging of all disciplines through a very umbrella framework, which is still in a draft stage, which is called the draft national credit framework. Now, these changes would mean that all institutions, whether they are engineering institutions or general education institutions, will have to firstly move away from the traditional mindset in which we have been offering the academic programs to a completely new format. And in that sense, the NEP 2020 is a highly transformative document and a transformative policy, because it has not merely tinkered with reforms, but it has tried to overhaul the existing structures and the existing processes, not only in terms of the academic aspects, but also in terms of governance and regulation. But let me not take up too many things in the short time that we have today, and focus largely on how, as engineering institutions, what are those changes that you will be able to take forward to implement the national education policy. And while I say this, let me also place on record that a policy in its totality getting implemented is a very long drawn process. And the instrumentalities to implement the policy are brought out by regulatory systems or the regulatory institutions, regulatory bodies, if I may say. So you have the University Grants Commission, the All India Council for Technical Education, which is what you all are largely connected with. But all the guidelines that the UGC have been brought out by committees which subsumed within itself representatives of the All India Council of Technical Education and those who came in from the technical education background. And therefore, the UGC guidelines apply uniformly to all institutions of higher education. And in that sense, therefore, if you are looking for implementation guidelines only from the All India Council of Technical Education, you are not likely to get the relevant guidelines, because the UGC as a body has taken into account the requirements of changes that the NEP envisages even in technical education, so that the UGC guidelines become binding on all institutions. And in that sense, the most important one relates to the character of the 4-year undergraduate program. While we have used it as flexible 3-year and 4-year, in engineering education, since you already have a 4-year program, which embeds within itself the 3-year program also, what is important for you to know is that in the 4-year engineering program, firstly, you will have to move away from your core engineering subjects and be able to embrace other subjects and other courses, which may be in social sciences, which can be in humanities, which can be in languages, which can be in performing arts, which can be in sports, including medicine, pharmacy, agriculture, law, all these areas. So an engineering student, where today conventionally has been doing only core engineering subjects and maybe a few foundation level courses that are mandated in their first year, is not at all exposed to subjects of sociology or economics or learning a language or learning music or learning dance or playing hockey or cricket, and all this is now permitted under the new framework that we are talking about for multidisciplinary education. So, primarily, as engineering institutions, your first concern would be if you are part of a body which is a comprehensive management, which has arts, science, commerce, and others offered by your sister institutions, moving towards multidisciplinarity becomes much easier because in that umbrella comprehensive university, it is easier for a same management to take care of all these requirements of allowing students to choose courses. But if you all are not and you all are standalone institutions, it is not necessary that a standalone engineering college can invest a lot, both in terms of brick and mortar, in terms of equipments, and so on, to start disciplines which are not at all there as part of the engineering stream. The alternative to that would be to cluster with institutions which are not necessarily a part of your own management but are there in a given geographical vicinity. And so the UGC guidelines on moving towards multidisciplinary institutions is the first and foremost most important implementation guideline which you can sort of refer to in trying to implement the NEP in that spirit of moving towards multidisciplinary education. Now, this is one aspect, and when we enter into a cluster, the modalities of having a common academic committee, a common fee committee, a common timetable committee, all this is factored in so that students are not inconvenienced when they take up non-engineering disciplines across multiple institutions. We are also having guidelines which tell us about the character or the structure of the 4-year undergraduate program, which applies to engineering education. And I'm repeating that again and again, but also the guidelines which relate to multiple entry and exit. By this new architecture of the 4-year program, in engineering education, you all have never thought of a student leaving at the end of the first year or leaving at the end of the second year or third year. And we are now saying that the 4-year undergraduate program is about 160 academic credits, which in which a student earns every year 40 credits. And every year the student earning this 40 credits, he will have to do certain common courses which relate to communication skills, digital skills, research skills, environmental awareness, gender sensitivity, how to deal with various 21st century skills of problem solving, creative abilities, and cognitive abilities, and application of knowledge, and so on. This all the so-called 21st century skills that we are talking about, collaborative learning and all that. These are some of the common courses which we want every student to be exposed to. And the core courses, which are the disciplinary courses that they have. Here we are saying that they take up along with engineering, non-engineering courses. But when we are going to award at the end of the 4 years a degree, we want that out of the 160 credits, that the student does more than 50% of the credits in a given subject, which we are saying is something to the tune of about 64 credits. Why we are not saying exactly the half of 160 as 80 is that we are saying when you want to major, the minimum threshold of credits that a student can earn is 64. Someone can go beyond that and even earn maybe even 80 credits or so, but we are saying to get a major, you earn as many as 64 academic credits. And we are also saying that let us say a student wants to do an additional set of courses. We will be charging the fees per credit, so that if a student has the freedom or is wanting to do, is desirous of doing it, the system should not stop him from doing additional credits, for which we are saying we are going to allow something like an additional 16 credits over and above the 160 credits that a student can do, making it to a total of something like about 176 credits. Now, this combination means that at the beginning of the 3-year, 4-year undergraduate program, we will have to tell a student that while we are allowing you to take up sociology or economics or music or a vocational subject or learn a language, we are giving you all this flexibility. If you finally want a bachelor's of undergraduate education with majoring in mechanical engineering or computer science or IT or whatever your ECE, you will have to tell them that minimum you would have to have about 64 credits in that majoring discipline. You can take up two majoring subjects also, or you can take up one major with two minors also. Now, here, when you say that the student can exit at the end of every year, we are saying that the student is entitled to a certification at the end of the first year, which you have not thought of at all, because you do not, as of now, envisage a student leaving at the end of the first year engineering. You have to now accept that a student can leave at the end of the first year and get a certificate that he has completed the first year of an undergraduate program. The only condition is that the student has to submit a apprenticeship project, because it is an engineering or a technical based discipline. If the student is choosing to take up an internship in a non-engineering subject, then also it is permitted, but either an internship or an apprenticeship has to be completed to earn a certificate or a diploma. Now, first year we are talking about a certificate, second year we are talking about a diploma. We are also saying that when the student is given the flexibility to choose the subjects across institutions in a cluster mode arrangement, should a student want to choose a credit or a course that is not at all offered by institutions in and around in a given geographical vicinity, we have allowed for flexibility even in the mode of learning by saying that a student can take up a course offered by open and distance learning through open universities, or completely online course offered as a MOOCs course through the Swayam platform. As of now, we have not taken in any other platform other than our own indigenous Swayam platform, and therefore Coursera or edX or Udacity and all that have not been factored into in the NEP 2020. All that is done is that the AICT managed platform for online courses of Swayam is permitted, or to take up courses that are offered through the open and distance education through open universities at a national level or at a state level, depending on the location of the institution. So the flexibility is to exit and re-enter. The flexibility is in the modes of institution. The flexibility is in the choice of courses that the student can take. Now, what would be the ideal time period by which a student can exit and rejoin has been clearly laid out in another implementation guideline relating to a very important change in digitization of academic credits that we call as the academic bank of credit. An academic bank of credit moves away from physical maintenance of student records in terms of grades awarded or credits earned to a digital storehouse of academic credits, allowing for transparency, allowing for mobility, allowing for, that is, institutional mobility and credit mobility, and allowing institutions to seamlessly access the digital records of a student, and allow a student, if moving from, let us say, an engineering institution based in maybe Kerala to maybe an engineering institution based in Maharashtra, that credits earned by that student when joining, let us say, the second year or the third year in another state, in another institution, he redeems those credits in terms of having earned those credits, redeemed it, and those are allowing him to join and not redo those courses again, but go into seamlessly into the third year or the second year as he decides when that mobility is taking place. So the ABC is up and running. Students have to create it with an Aadhaar linked ID through the DigiLocker facility, and the institutions have already been asked to onboard onto the ABC. Have a look at the website of abc.gov.in for you to identify whether your own institutions have already done it, and if they have not, then they need to do it, because anyone remaining out of it will be denying the student the opportunity the facilities of all this mobility that the NEP envisages. The loser is not anyone else, but our own students who will not be getting all the benefits that we are talking about in this new paradigm that we are talking of, the flexible undergraduate program. Now, even in the engineering program, we are giving this option that a 4-year engineering program, a student can maybe take up in the 4th year, not necessarily just courses, but can take up a research project, which has not been thought of at all at your level now. And the so-called student who is taking up a research project in the 4th year of engineering is completely exempted from doing an MTech program under the new paradigm, or under the new architecture, curricular architecture, if I may say, to go and to do a PhD program. If the student is doing what is conventionally a 4-year program without research, then the student is doing something like what you currently have as your integrated BTech MTech, as a 1-year MTech program as against a 2-year MTech program. So the 4-year undergraduate under the new structure of flexible 4-year program will allow a student to do only a 1 year of masters, and therefore after that can pursue a PhD program. Now this change is sounding very simple as we speak, but it requires each one of you in the institutions to which you are associated, and if you are HODs or deans or heads of those institutions, to start looking at the UGC guidelines on moving towards multidisciplinary education, on the 4-year undergraduate program, on the multiple entry and exit, on the academic bank of credit, and also in terms of the 2 draft documents which are still to be notified by the UGC, expected to be brought out in 2 years, in 2 weeks, which is on the National Higher Education Qualifications Framework and the National Credit Framework. These 2 documents basically lay an overarching curricular framework and sort of gives us an equivalence of the courses that are covered. Like, as I said, if a student is moving from an engineering program in Kerala to, let us say, Maharashtra, the Maharashtra state institution cannot insist on that student doing the course all over again, not only because he has covered those courses, but the equivalence of those courses have been established through the NHEQF. And the credit framework that we are talking of is right from the school to the PhD level in terms of the credits earned, and in terms of students who may be coming in from polytechnics and ITIs and seeking lateral entry. Their equivalence of credits earned in those institutions are established through the National Credit Framework, because it is one seamless credit framework covering skill-based education, covering that includes the technical, polytechnic education, engineering education, the general education, the BWOC programs, all of it being looked at in terms of the credits earned. So this whole complexity is something that we need to be acclimatized to, getting familiar to, so that we ourselves as teachers, as faculty, we come to know about all these changes that are happening, so that when the student comes in for their counseling and subsequently in their induction meeting, you are able to make them aware of these changes. And also, more importantly, because even now our students are largely guided by their parents and by their peers, they also need to have the advocacy going around in terms of the changes. The other major change is, so far you have offered engineering education only in English language. And the NEP 2020 talks in terms of offering undergraduate education either bilingually or in regional languages. And 8 states have come forward with the AICT taking a call in it in terms of offering engineering courses in regional languages. So as teachers, it becomes incumbent on us, in terms of the language proficiency that we may have in our regional languages, which we may be using for conversational purposes, may not have the confidence to use it for curricular transaction, to equip ourselves in terms of trying to think, can we move towards bilingual teaching at the undergraduate level? In terms of the learning resources and the reference material, there is an Indian translation and interpretation mission, and there is also a digital mission which is undertaking the translation of not only e-content but also textbooks, reference books into regional languages. There is to some extent the use of technology, but because of the fact that technology, any transliteration through machines can be completely haywire, the human element of it to ensure that the language that is used is to actually interpret that textbook in the correct manner is being done in a mission mode manner through this Indian translation and interpretation mission that we have undertaken. Now, this part of it relating to moving towards moving away from English based to not moving away, allowing students the flexibility along with English to take up in regional languages has stemmed from the fact that you know that India has a rich pluralistic heritage of languages. But at the same time, English is an elitist language even today. And many of our students actually do not perform well because of the fact that they cannot communicate well in English. Now, communication skills does not necessarily mean only English communication skills, but to be able to understand a subject, to understand the concepts, and to actually express it properly, whether it is in a group discussion or whether it is in a project that you're undertaking, is what we are trying to emphasize on. As I like to mention that the NEP 2020, right from the middle stage of school, from class 6 onwards, is emphasizing a lot on moving away from rote based learning and testing of memory to actually inculcating those skills in our students, which hones their problem solving capabilities, their creative abilities, their higher order thinking skills, their abilities to be analytical by nature, promoting their scientific temper, so that they are able to apply what they have learned into real life situations. And that is the reason why at the undergraduate level we have tried as far as possible to make it mandatory for all students to do an internship project, mainly because the gap between the world of education and the world of work, which has resulted in many industry and employers telling that all undergraduate students, at least 40%, are unemployable. Their employability skills are at a very low level. We need to reinvest in training them and unlearning what they have learned. All these would vanish to a great extent if actually the manner in which we transact the curricula itself gives them abilities to participate in group discussions, in activities which hone their collaborative learning skills, work together in a team, their organizational capabilities, good communication skills, and actually understand the importance that in 21st century learning, it is not just memory based learning that can hold them in good stead, but it would be all these additional skills, including using technological skills and research based skills. So the NEP makes out another important change in trying to say that the promoting research at undergraduate education, and our undergraduate students, when they uh, sort of are exposed to research questions, framing a research question, preparing what may be called as a hypothesis, how do we establish that that hypothesis is null or not through deploying a lot of research tools, statistical tools, and so on. These have to be taught at an undergraduate level and not to be sort of confined. The reason why Indian institutions do not feature in the global rankings is at our undergraduate level, we have completely disconnected teaching and research. Without understanding that teaching and research actually go hand in hand together, and these research skills, in a certain way, provoke many of those areas which promote creative thinking and higher order thinking skills and analytical skills and so on. Now, the other important aspect is to leverage a very close connect between academia, industry, and research laboratories. And I'm sure chapters like yours will actually be starting to work not in terms of just educational institutions, and understand the cross linkages that adds to the employability quotient of our students by linking it not just with the industry in terms of tokenism of a project, which we all know is an eyewash, and nothing being done on the real terms at all, and which is very, very sad to know, because it is merely done by you scratch my back, I know you, therefore my son comes there, does a project, or my daughter comes, and they haven't really learned anything at all. Rather than that, the real understanding of how it is to do a project in an industrial environment or in a corporate environment, at the same time also ensuring that they sort of connect to research based institutions and research organizations and research associations, so that these three move together in a very interrelated manner, not at an MTech level, but at an undergraduate level. Along with this, can we encourage young students to have their innovative skills and entrepreneurial skills being honed up by trying to establish that they can have their own startups? And in a world where we are moving so much towards disruptive technologies, the sort of opportunities are sort of endless in terms of what are the startups that are possible. And we all know, we need not actually be talking about it, but we know all the success stories of those who have set up their startups, and even within the startups, linking it also to a lot of new areas of vocational based education like retail management and agro-business management and blockchain management and logistics management, bringing all this together in terms of having startups by our students. And therefore, the seamless understanding between skill based education and general education, not just the engineering education, becomes a very critical part of trying to implement the NEP 2020. So these are some of the major changes that we are looking at. But I'll touch upon a couple of other aspects that you have to sort of think in terms of exploring for making NEP truly what we say is for the 21st century. And that is in terms of international collaborations. The policy has not only talked in terms of strengthening our institutions in terms of the quality and the excellence, weaving in equity aspects and access aspects, but has also realized that we are living in a world of competitiveness. And competitiveness must be encouraged in the spirit of healthy competition. And for that, the policy talks in terms of internationalization of higher education, where our students can get mobility through their academic programs in terms of dual degrees with foreign universities, twinning arrangements that are possible, and joint degrees. And the UGC guidelines on internationalization of higher education has clearly outlined these opportunities that are there. And we would like to see more international students on our campus, as much as see many of our Indian students acquiring degrees of other universities through the arrangements of twinning and joint degrees and so on. We are also talking in terms of the International Students Office, and you're all aware of the recent UGC regulations, which allow foreign universities to set up campuses on which there is the final regulation is not yet brought out because of the feedback that it is still seeking. And it would have factored in many of the changes that generally people have asked in terms of trying to ensure that, it's a fair play, it's a level playing field that we are giving, and that we are creating a win-win situation for both the sets of institutions and not encouraging too much of commercialization or fly-by-night operators. Now, in this whole exercise of trying to implement the national education policy, as a teacher myself, I would say that none of these changes in the policy will come about if we only look at something that is being externally driven. And it is the teachers who need to own and invest into this policy, which would mean that you shed your departmental hierarchies Give up your academic egos that my discipline is more important than the other discipline. Start talking to other disciplines so that you embrace the idea of multidisciplinarity. Now, at the same time, we also would like the faculty to really start looking at how we can move away from rote based learning to critical thinking and so on by using or deploying within the classroom situation in online teaching and so on what we call as active learning environments where students, teachers, curricula are engaging each other in a very vibrant, enriching discussion so that there is an understanding that is happening, and there is also a feeling that teachers are there not as information givers but are there as facilitators, as enablers, as mentors, and are partners with the learners in the in a enriched learning environment. Obviously, to do all this, capacity building and incentivization of faculty is very, very critical. And while many of us are motivated and are here because of our passion for teaching, we must understand that that being having been said, the policy giving you the autonomy and recognizing the criticality of the teachers and the need for their academic autonomy, capacity building and continuous professional development with career growth is incumbent upon teachers actually transforming themselves in these new roles. But while I say all this, I will like to sort of end with one instrumentality which I don't think many of us talk about it, but is very, very significant, is that every higher education institution the NEP had envisaged will create what we call an institutional development plan, which is nothing but a strategic plan of action and a vision document with where your own thinking, that is, the institution is doing it, no one external, where you are working together as a collegiate body. When we say you are working together, it means the management, the faculty, the students, the civil society, the industry, the academicians, the scientific community, the parental community, the local representatives working together to identify your own institution. It's like an institutional SWOT analysis, and then saying whether we would like to go forward becoming a teaching intensive university or a research intensive university or a multidisciplinary education and research university, or if you are a college, whether you would like to move away from an affiliated status to becoming a degree granting autonomous college. Now, that document has to be a living document which has to be constantly looked at, modified, making mid course corrections, but it has to be essentially a democratic exercise within an institution with all internal stakeholders coming together with external stakeholders who are involved in that exercise coming together and carving for oneself as an institution where you would like to go forward, which would mean that if yours is a very rich institution and you don't mind actually setting up new departments, new domain areas of knowledge, which are those ones that you can think in terms of setting it up? Or if you are wanting to do a clustering, then which are those institutions with which you can cluster? So rather than an ad hocism, there is a very clear articulation of goals and objectives and ways in which to achieve those goals and objectives, either in 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, 5 years, or so on. It's not usually expected that an IDP will be for 15 years, though there is no harm in making a long term plan, but it can be ideally for 3 to 5 to 7 years, and a document which is constantly revised, taking into account what are the implementation hurdles and bottlenecks that we face. So let me stop here and just recapitulate what I wanted to say, that a policy is as good as it gets implemented. And the implementation is not on someone else. And implementation is within us. There are indicative guidelines that may be laid out, and as an institution, particularly a higher education institution, which is an autonomous institution, it is for us to take the decisions as to what all we can do. Some levels of institutional preparedness may take 5 years to achieve. Some levels of institutional preparedness may take just a year to achieve. But There is no one size fits all, and it is for each one of us, in terms of the institution within which we are situated and the larger enabling canvas that the NEP offers, in terms of trying to implement the NEP 2020. As far as the policy itself, we are hoping that across the country, we would like to see all these new changes actually getting translated by about 2040, which is about 17 years from now. But we need not wait for that. We start with small baby steps to move towards the direction, because from the coming academic year, we are anyway rolling out the new 4-year undergraduate program, which itself is a handful for each of us to really find out how to go about implementing it. I have only given in this short time a few pointers on where are those guidelines that you can access. It is now for each one of us to see how we can take it forward. I once again wish all of you the very best in terms of your endeavors, and once again rededicate ourselves to the cause of digital, using innovation and technology to achieve gender equality, and also that we proactively work in our own small mites to implement the National Education Policy 2020, because it empowers us as faculty, through which we empower our students and through which we empower our higher educational institutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shakila ma'am, and your participants to share their thoughts or to ask any clarifications with our Shakila ma'am. I think Dr. Keshav sir wanted to say something and invite him to speak out. Sir.
Okay. No, I just gave on video. Obviously, this topic is very dear to me, Dr. Shakila madam. And within 45 minutes, it was an amazing job what you have done. Right? It is amazing. And I have a suggestion for IEEE Education Society as well as IEEE Kerala chapter. We should organize another session, a very similar session, maybe a little different, by Professor Shakila madam, for private education institution management, because many of these implementations, it has to get full support from top management of the different education institutions. What new education policy offers is amazing, and ultimately the problem, any problem, it's not a problem to be solved by a mechanical engineer, to be solved by a mathematician, to be solved by a psychologist professor, right? Any problem in the world is multidisciplinary in nature. And this new education policy exactly equips our students to face this complex problem situations, which is not unidimensional issue. So that way, this is really amazing, and also the mobility associated with the credit-based learning system is, I really love it. And the professor had done a remarkable job, and I wish to be in touch with her subsequently also. And definitely, we have to take this message to the college leadership teams. And students should fully exploit the opportunities available here, and that is possible provided management support them.
Thank you, Keshav Sami sir, and others, please unmute your mic and.
Yeah, actually, hearing this talk, I feel it's a dream come true if the policy is really fully implemented. Madam, is there any restriction? I mean, any state can keep away from it, or it's a mandatory all the states to follow?
I would put it this way: if a state chooses to remain away from it, it is taking a huge risk of isolating itself from the major changes that are happening. And
Yeah,
you will not find any state. See, at a political level, a state may say, I don't endorse it. But at the operational level, all these changes, even for the national curriculum framework in Kerala for that matter, while they have said that the state will bring out their own curriculum framework, that curriculum framework is adhering to the new 5+3+3 paradigm itself, because they're talking of all the 4 curricula that we are talking about in the policy. But as I said, no state can afford to really allow students. Now, if you say that we will not implement the academic bank of credit, I don't think any state can take a risk of giving a directive to its institutions that you will not onboard onto the ABC to show their dissent or their resentment to the national education policy. So I don't think you will have clear directions which tell you not to implement it. All that they may say, maybe at a political level, that may be different. And I don't think we as academicians should be guided by that. We should be more interested in seeing what it is. And I'm sure every state government works for the betterment of their students' achievement levels, institutions' growth, India, the faculty development, all that, whatever we are saying, but they may do it in a different manner. But the broad instrumentalities will remain the same, because you cannot remain outside those instrumentalities. So you can't say, I will not follow UGC guidelines. I don't think any state government can afford to say, we will not follow UGC guidelines. It's almost as if they will inevitably have to follow it. It's imperative that they follow it. But we are emphasizing that states may be in different levels of preparedness, and therefore somebody may do it faster, someone may do it a little slower, but the change will have to be accepted. That's what I think, Professor Varghese.
Yeah, thank you, madam.
Yeah. Any other, please?
Hello, good evening, madam. That was a nice session. My doubt is, in order to implement many of these policies, the faculty should be given a proper training. So, without the faculty training, we cannot implement these policies. So, is the policy mentioning anything about the faculty training or some funding to the institutions like that?
Professor Ansar, I may mention that I used to handle in the Government of India a scheme called the Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya National Mission on Teachers and Teaching, which is nothing but a scheme aimed at creating centers for capacity building and professional development, starting with induction programs, online teaching, and so on. There is no paucity of funds by the UGC, by the AICT through quality improvement programs and so on, which prevents an institution from leveraging those funds. The question is, I must mention to you, the woefully inadequate implementation of those schemes, where the funds were actually getting lapsed because institutions were not using it. So every institution has an IQAC cell or a quality improvement cell, and you have opportunities for 3 days program, 5 days program, 15 days program, 21 days program, either through the AICT faculty development programs or through the UGC ones, or even through some of the approved centers of the National Mission on Teachers and Teaching. But what is important is that these trainings are not really lecture based. You must actually make faculty understand some of these changes. That kind of training program. So right now, as part of NEP advocacy, at least I have been speaking sort of left, right, and center at so many centers where we are talking to faculty, and a large number of faculty are getting exposed to the recommendations of NEP. But now, basically, at the institution level, or a group of institutions coming together must hold actual hands-on workshop. And the NEP is very clear that, as I mentioned also, that we are talking of capacity building, continuous professional development, exposure to training programs. This is almost an ongoing regular activity throughout the career of a faculty, because of the changes that we want them to. So the institutions, unfortunately, do not leverage it. That's what I said. We are so structured, we don't realize we are autonomous. We don't realize we are. I always say, in a faculty induction program for newly recruited assistant professors, I have started teaching in 1981 in a college in Bombay University. I have always believed that I am the king or the queen in the class, as long as I deploy methods to make the learners understand, work out their own strategies, and assimilate it. That is the manner in which, and who stops you? In a 45-minute class or a 1-hour class, I don't think your principal or your HOD comes wielding a stick and saying, no, you can't do this, you can't do that, and so on. You, as long as you are transacting a curricula, teaching it in a manner by which the learning experience are enriched and their outcomes are improved, giving them group activities, doing many ways. I think we as teachers have failed to recognize the strength that we have in being an autonomous faculty and deploying all that. Now, training programs should highlight these aspects, and a newly recruited assistant professor or an associate professor or even a professor for that matter has to unlearn. In fact, more senior you are, you will not change at all because you are hard set in the manner in which you taught for 30, 40 years. We are the ones who are most difficult to change, but we are saying that yes, unless you change, you are not going to do better for your students. And I think ultimately our objective is our students should perform better. If our student is jobless and 10 year, and how do we track our in higher education, do we track our students? We don't. It is so sad. Do we know where our students went? Are they employed? Are they having their own thing, or are they just whiling away their time doing it? I think that accountability also needs to come in. But I fully endorse your view that we must have faculty development programs which are hands-on kind of training for faculty to make all these changes of moving away from rote-based learning to higher order thinking skills and so on.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. And Anil sir, do you want to share some thoughts or something? Anil sir.
Sir, good evening, ma'am. In fact, no, I was of the view that pre-NEP era, our students need to be educated in a multidisciplinary fashion, like science and engineering students must be taught some sociology, philosophy, or psychology, and similarly, arts and social sciences students need to be teach some science and maths to improve the quality of education. And it's nice to hear from you that it has come up in the NEP and it's being taken up that way. Thank you so much, ma'am. Your talk was so amazing, so interesting. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Anyone else?
I have one comment. Sorry.
Yes, please.
Professor Shakila, I have one query regarding learning in regional languages. Of course, you said it is option is there. One can learn in English as well as in the regional language. Now, regional language is almost absent across the country. And I understand the importance of learning in regional language because myself, when I moved from Tamil medium in my school to PUC in English medium, I suffered a lot. I did not perform great. It took some time for me to adjust to the new medium, right? So learning in mother tongue has an important advantage. That is what NEP emphasizes. I agree with that. But there is an inherent conflict when the credit-based system enables mobility of the people from, as your example you said, from Kerala to Maharashtra, he can complete the program with taking the credits what he earned earlier. That is possible provided he has done that in English. If he had done that in Malayalam here and going to Maharashtra, Malayalam medium will not be available for him there. So people who have this mobility issues, they have to necessarily choose English. That caution, obviously, as you said, the NEP gives option of learning in English also. People who have mobility because of father's transfer and other reasons, then they should choose English. Otherwise, one should choose Malayalam in Kerala. Or I speak Tamil in Tamil Nadu. I love it. This flexibility, I love it.
Yes, the idea is, of course, to actually, we would like to see people who did not join higher education because it's an English medium actually being facilitated to join higher education. But someone who is has to be told at the beginning that if you're not going to do it in the same place you want and you're taking up your own regional language, you may have problems when you adjust to other states and you're moving on to other states. Otherwise, you will have to take it over there in English itself, which is also being offered over there. So that has to be told upfront to the student. That is why, as I said, we must be sort of fully aware of what all we need to tell our students so that they make the right choices.
Amazing. I love it.
Yeah, thank you. And now I invite Lisha Babu, Dr. Lisha Babu, who really requested me to arrange for this talk by our Shakila ma'am. And so, Lisha ma'am, please share your thoughts or say thanks to our Shakila ma'am. I invite Lisha ma'am.
Good evening, madam.
Good evening.
The session was very informative and very clearly you are speaking the future plans and everything. So, uh, so thank you, madam, for giving such a wonderful speech and information also. And thank you, madam. On behalf of IEEE Education Society and why I my, my sincere gratitude to madam. Thank you, madam.
Thank you, Lisha, and thank you to the entire team.
Yeah, thank you, Shakila ma'am. Once again, on behalf of Kerala section, then Women in Engineering Affinity Group chapter and Education Society Kerala chapter, and we will keep in touch with you, and we will really like to have more sessions from you in the coming days. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank you
very
all.
much.
Thank you the participants
Yeah.
also. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. See you all.